I was walking through the park on my way to the studio today. It's a nice day, breeze is blowing, birds are chirping, and I found myself looking at the trees and the grass and just thinking, it's all so peaceful, so passive. It's just nice green scenery.
And that is exactly what they want you to think.
See, I knew you were going to say that. It sounds like the start of a conspiracy theory. But after going through the stack of research we have for today's deep dive, I think my peaceful park walk was actually a stroll through a war zone.
It sounds dramatic, but it's true. It's maybe the greatest trick nature ever pulled on us. We look at a meadow and we see, a still life painting. But if you actually dive into the biology, and the sources we're covering today range from dense educational texts to some really specific quizzes on behavioral biology, that meadow is a battlefield.
It is. It's a high-stakes, cutthroat game of survival. We aren't just talking about growing leaves here. We're talking about organisms that engage in complex bribery, develop what is basically cloning technology,
Yeah.
and design these elaborate travel systems for their children. And all because, and this is the kicker, they physically cannot move.
That is the fundamental constraint. And that's really the mission for today's deep dive. We need to flip the script on that boring plant stereotype. We need to figure out how they solve the same problems animals face eating, mating, conquering territory without having legs or eyes or, a brain.
And what determines if they make it or if they just wither away? Because the failure rate is incredibly high.
Oh, it's astronomical.
So let's start at the very beginning of the life cycle, the basics of keeping the lineage alive. Our sources highlight this massive fork in the road right at the start. It seems plants have two completely opposing philosophies for the next generation.
Right. It's the classic quality versus quantity debate, or maybe you could call it efficiency versus diversity. You
Right.
have the clones and you have the gamblers.
Let's talk about the clones first, because in our world, in sci-fi movies, cloning is this futuristic high-tech thing. But for plants, it's actually the old school way, isn't it?
It is. It's asexual reproduction. And the sources all describe it as just incredibly efficient energetically. I mean, think about it from an economic standpoint. You don't need a partner. You don't need to produce expensive nectar to bribe a bee. You don't have to wait for the wind to blow. You just copy yourself.
One of the examples that popped out to me was the spider plant. I think a lot of listeners probably have one of these hanging in their living room.
It's a classic example of what's called vegetative propagation. If you look closely at a spider plant, it produces these long stems. They're called stolons. And at the ends, you get these tiny plantlets.
They look like little mini-me's.
Exactly. They just hang there, feeding off the parent's energy. Then eventually, they get heavy, they droop down, hit the soil, root themselves, and boom, a new plant, genetically identical to its parent.
And tubers do this too, right? Like potatoes. You leave a potato in the pantry too long and it starts sprouting those weird little eyes.
Those eyes are buds. If you put that potato in the ground, it sprouts roots directly from the parent body. It's cloning. But the most impressive example in our notes, and this one really challenges our idea of what an individual is, has to be the aspen tree.
The aspen, yeah, this blew my mind because when I look at a forest, I count trees. One trunk equals one tree. That's the math.
In an aspen grove, that math is just completely wrong. You walk in, you see hundreds of white trunks, those beautiful golden leaves shaking in the wind. You think you're looking at a forest of individuals, but what you're often looking at is one single organism.
One organism.
One organism. The aspen is a master of this. It sends up multiple stems, what we see as the trunks, from a single massive interconnected root system. So that whole grove, it's basically one giant clone.
That is wild. So if I cut down one trunk, the root system isn't dead?
Not at all. It just says, no worries, I'll send up another one. It's actually a survival strategy against things like beavers or storms.
Like a hydra. You cut off one head, two more grow back.
Precisely. This makes them incredibly resilient and really fast at colonizing new areas. We call them a pioneer species.
Yeah.
If an area is wiped out by a fire, astens can move in fast because they don't need to wait for a sea to get lucky. They just extend their network underground.
Okay, so here's where I get stuck. If cloning is so fast and so efficient, and you don't need to go through the hassle of, dating, which we'll get to, why doesn't every plant just do that?
That is the million-dollar question, and the answer is risk.
Risk.
Think about the biology of it. If that whole aspen grove is genetically identical, it means every single trunk has the exact same immune system, the same genetic code.
Oh, I see where this is going. If one virus comes along that happens to have the key to that specific immune system,
It doesn't just kill one tree, it wipes out the entire forest. It's a total system failure. That's the huge downside of cloning. It's what we call a monoculture. Zero variation means zero adaptability.
Which brings us to the second path, sexual reproduction,
Hmm.
the gamblers.
Yes. This involves the combination of male and female gametes, sperm and egg.
And the big payoff here is diversity.
Correct. When you mix genes from two parents, you get offspring that are different from both. It's a genetic shuffle. Maybe one inherits a slightly thicker leaf from dad or better root efficiency from mom.
So it's a portfolio strategy. If a massive heat wave hits, the clones might all crash because they're all invested in the same stock. But in the sexual reproduction group, you might have a few weirdos who happen to love the heat and they survive to rebuild.
Exactly. It creates a population that can handle change. It's an insurance policy against an unpredictable world. You're trading efficiency for resilience.
So we have the strategy, mixed genes. But this creates a huge logistical nightmare. Plants can't walk over to a bar and meet someone. They need technology.
And that tech has evolved drastically. Our sources really highlight a clear divide here between the ancient way and the modern upgrade.
Let's call it the seedless era versus the seed era.
Perfect framing.
So take us back. We're talking about the dinosaurs of the plant world. Ferns and mosses.
Right. These are your non-flowering, seedless plants. If you flip over a fern leaf, have you ever seen those little brown spots on the back?
Yeah, honestly, I always thought that was a disease. Or bug eggs or something. I usually try to wipe them off.
Well, please don't. That's their future children. Those are actually sories. They're groups of spore bags. They release spores, which are these tiny dust-like particles.
And these spores grow into new ferns.
Eventually. But there's a massive catch with these guys. The sources call it a water constraint. In these plants, the sperm actually has to swim to the egg.
Literally swim, like with a little tail.
Essentially, yes. It has a flagellum. It needs a continuous film of water to travel from the male part to the female part.
That seems unbelievably limiting. So if you're a fern, you can't live in the desert.
Not easily, no. You're restricted to rainforests, damp places, or anywhere that gets regular heavy dew. You are tethered to moisture. If the water dries up, reproduction just stops.
So the huge evolutionary upgrade was figuring out how to reproduce without needing a swimming pool.
Enter the seed. A seed is a masterpiece of biological engineering. Unlike a spore, which is just a lonely little cell, a seed is a survival capsule.
It's like a spaceship for a baby plant.
It really is. It contains the embryo, the baby plant, but it also has a packed lunch, a food supply, and it's all wrapped in a hard protective coating.
So it can survive getting dried out.
Yeah.
It allows plants to finally reproduce on dry land.
Exactly. It broke the tether to water, and this splits into two main groups in our notes. You have the gymnosperms, which literally means naked seeds.
Which are your pine trees, your conifers.
Right. They use cones. Pollen lands on a female cone, fertilizes the egg, and the seed forms right there, just sitting exposed on the scale of the cone. It's functional, sturdy, and it's very effective.
But then the angiosperms arrived, the disruptors.
The flowering plants. And as one of your sources noted, these are the dominant group on Earth today. They took over because they added another layer of technology.
And they do something different. They don't just make a seed, they wrap it in fruit.
Right. Protection and persuasion all in one package. But before we get to the fruit, which is all about leaving home, we have to talk about how they get the seed made in the first place.
Pollination. The dating scene.
Or, as I like to think of it, the art of persuasion. Because again, the plant can't move, it needs to get its pollen, which carries the sperm to another flower.
They need a courier service.
Exactly. And there are two main providers, the wind or the animal.
I love the bit in the notes about Henry's hypothesis. It really breaks down the logic of why some plants look the way they do.
It's strictly utilitarian, isn't it? Henry noted that non-flowering plants, or plants with really boring tiny flowers like grasses, they usually rely on wind.
Which makes perfect sense. If you're using the wind, you don't need to be pretty. You don't need colorful petals. The wind doesn't have eyes.
You just need to be aerodynamic and produce a massive amount of pollen. Because wind is messy, it's inefficient, you have to just flood the air and hope a few grains land on target by pure chance.
Which explains my hay fever in the spring.
Unfortunately, yes. That misery you feel is the feeling of wind pollination working exactly as intended. But it's also really unpredictable.
So the alternative is hiring a professional. An insect, a bird, a bat.
But animals don't work for free, they're mercenaries.
This is the bribery part.
It's purely transactional. The sources talk about nectar. We think of flowers as beautiful, but that beauty is just a billboard. The nectar is the payment. It's a sugar-rich liquid that serves zero purpose for the plant itself. It is solely there to trick an animal into visiting.
And while the animal is drinking the sugar water,
The plant dumps pollen all over them.
there was a great example of the heliconia flower. It doesn't just offer the nectar up on a platter. It makes them work for it.
Ooh, the heliconia is tricky. It hides its nectar deep inside these modified leaves. So a bird has to physically jam itself in there, really squeeze in to get the reward.
Making sure they get absolutely covered in pollen.
It's physically designed to force contact. It's geometry.
But the coolest interaction, the one that felt like a heist movie setup, has to be the saguaro cactus.
The saguaro is a specialist. It's in the desert. It's scorching hot during the day. If you open your flower at noon, your nectar might just evaporate.
So it opens its flowers at night.
And crucially, the flowers are white
Why white?
to reflect moonlight. They aren't trying to attract bees, they're targeting bats.
Ah,
Bats are nocturnal, they have a great sense of smell, and they navigate by sight and sonar. A massive white flower glowing in the moonlight, smelling sweet, full of nectar. It's a beacon.
that is incredibly specific targeting. It seems risky, though. What if the bats don't show up?
It is high risk, high reward. Bats are strong flyers. They travel far, which means they spread the pollen across a much wider genetic pool. But the saguaro's relationship with animals doesn't end there. It also produces fruit.
Right, and the sources mention coyotes and birds, and this is where the intent of the plant gets complicated.
This is where it gets messy. So, the saguaro wants its fruit eaten so the seeds can be spread. If a coyote eats the fruit, it travels, digests the fruit pulp, but passes the seeds.
So it deposits them somewhere new with a little pile of fertilizer.
A perfect start for a young cactus. But the source mentions that some birds have digestions that are too efficient. They actually digest the seeds entirely.
So the seed is destroyed. That's a loss for the plant.
A decreased chance of reproduction, as the text puts it. So the plant is constantly balancing these relationships, attracting the good partners while surviving the bad ones.
That's a whole economy. So let's say the bribe worked. The bat visited, seed is made. Now the kid needs to move out.
Seed dispersal. This is critical because of competition.
Right. The notes say that if a seed just falls next to the parent, it's bad news.
Oh, it's terrible news. You're dropping your child into your own shadow. You are now competing for the same sunlight, the same water, the same patch of soil. The parent becomes the enemy.
So you got to get out of the house. Find your own apartment.
You have to travel. And again, plants have developed some genius engineering for this.
We've got mechanical travel. I think everyone knows the dandelion.
The parachute method. It's simple aerodynamics. The seed is attached to that fluffy structure that catches the wind, letting it travel for miles. It's low energy, high volume.
Then there are the hitchhikers.
Burrs.
Hooks and barbs. I'm sure you found these on your socks after a hike.
Oh, yeah. Or in my dog's fur. Impossible to get out.
That's the point. They grab onto fur or your socks and refuse to let go until the animal is far away and scratches it off. You're the taxi.
But my favorite is still the tasty snack strategy. We talked about the coyote, but this explains why apples are sweet, right? Yes. Think about it from the plant's perspective. Producing sugar is expensive. Photosynthesis takes a lot of work. Why make an apple sweet? Why make it turn bright red?
It's a signal. I'm ready. Eat me.
It wants you or a deer or a bird to eat it, walk a mile, and then poop out the seeds. The fruit is just the ticket price for transportation.
There's also the forgetful squirrel method. I didn't realize how significant this was until reading the stats in our source material.
The acorn strategy. Oaks produce a nut that's nutritious and has a hard shell, so squirrels bury them to save for winter.
But they don't have GPS.
No? And they lose a significant percentage. They forget where they hid them. Every forgotten acorn is a successfully planted tree buried at the perfect depth. The squirrel thinks it's storing food. The tree knows it's hiring a gardener.
So we've cloned, we've pollinated, we've traveled. Now the seed is in the ground, and it's do or die time.
Growth factors. This is the final hurdle.
The sources list the basics: air, sunlight, water, nutrients, space. But what struck me is that it's not one size fits all.
No. Genetics play a massive role. A fern has genes that demand low light and high moisture. A cactus has genes that demand the opposite. You can't swap them. It's hard-coded.
There was that interesting point about rice in the notes. Rice is a staple for billions of people.
Right. And traditionally, rice roots genetically require being submerged in water, which uses a huge amount of global water resources.
So source mentioned farmers are trying to influence those genetics.
Exactly. If they can breed varieties that trigger growth with less water, it changes the entire agricultural landscape. It shows these needs aren't just preferences, they're genetic instructions, but those instructions also include a clock.
A clock?
A timing mechanism. Seeds are smart about when they grow. They have a snooze button. It's called dormancy.
Right, a seed can just sit there. For how long?
Depending on the species, years, even decades. They just sit in the soil waiting for the right environmental triggers.
And sometimes these triggers are totally counterintuitive. I mean, we think warmth plus water equals growth.
Usually, yes. But some seeds, like the Dutch iris mentioned in the text, require a freeze first.
They need to be frozen.
They need the cold to break down chemical inhibitors in the seed coat. Basically, the seed has a lock on it, and the cold weather is the key. The seed is saying, I won't grow until I've survived a winter because that guarantees I'm emerging in the spring.
That is so smart. It uses the temperature as a calendar.
And then there's fire.
Fire.
Some seeds, particularly in pine forests, have such a hard shell. It's sealed with resin. They literally need the intense heat of a forest fire to melt the resin and crack them open.
So the fire destroys the forest, but it wakes up the seed.
Yeah, exactly. It's a scorched earth renewal strategy. The fire clears the competition, and the new seedling drops into a world with ash for fertilizer and full sunlight because the canopy is gone. It turns a disaster into a birth event.
Which brings us to the final battle. Competition. Because once you wake up, you aren't alone.
Space is limited. If it's too crowded, plants will die. They'll starve for light.
The text mentioned a specific turf war between aspens and conifers. It's like a slow-motion takeover.
It's called succession. Remember, the aspens are pioneers. They grow fast in the sun, creating a nice shady canopy. But guess who likes shade when they're babies?
Conifers.
Conifers. So the pine trees grow up happily under the protection of the aspens. But as the pines get taller, they eventually pierce the canopy. They block the sun.
And aspens need sun. They can't survive in the shade.
So the aspens die out, and the conifers take over. It's a slow-motion changing of the guard. The nurse tree gets replaced by the tree it nursed.
Man, it really is a drama out there. We just see trees standing there, but they're actively fighting, timing their birth, and manipulating the animals around them.
It is a constant negotiation with the environment.
So let's recap this journey. We started with that basic choice. Clone yourself for speed or gamble on sex for diversity.
Right. Then we looked at the tech upgrade from spores, which need water to swim, to seeds, which are these armored survival capsules.
We navigated the dating scene of pollination, where you either play the lottery with the wind or you pay a bribe of nectar to a bat or a bee.
We hitched a ride on a forgetful squirrel or a parachute to find a new home, escaping the shadow of our parents.
And then we battled for resources, waiting for the perfect freeze or fire to wake us up, just to do it all over again.
It's a relentless cycle of problem solving.
It really changes how I look at the produce section.
It should. Every apple, every potato, every bag of rice, that is the result of millions of years of refining these strategies. That apple is a successful bribe. That potato is a successful clone.
It makes you wonder about agency.
How so?
Well, we think we're the ones farming the plants. We arrange them in the rows, we water them, we pick them. We think we're in charge. But hearing all this, they're manipulating animals to carry their babies, they're predicting the weather, they're using us to move their genes around the world. I mean, we cleared entire continents just to plant wheat.
That is the big question. We think we're the gardeners. But from the plant's perspective, we might just be the squirrels.
Just really efficient squirrels.
Exactly. Who is really cultivating whom?
Something to chew on next time you eat a salad. Thanks for diving in with us today.
A pleasure.
And to you listening, keep looking closely at the green stuff. It's up to more than you think. Catch you on the next deep dive.